Hi everyone, I'm Mack, and welcome to another episode of the Golden Rule Revolution, where inspiration and purpose come from treating people like people and nothing less. Today, I am honored to bring to you a husband, a father, a business executive, a speaker, an author, and someone that is truly transforming lives through the business community and how business leaders treat their employees and create cultures based on health versus fear, intimidation, and all the things that no one likes. So please welcome Bobby Herrera. Bobby, thank you so much for joining the Golden Rule Revolution.
Yeah, let's do some good. I'm excited to be here. Can't think of a better way to end the week.
Oh man, thank you. So let's start off your story. Where did you come from and grow up?
Well, I was a kid born on the wrong side of the opportunity divide, Lucas. I grew up in southeastern New Mexico, small ranching farming community. I grew up in a migrant farm working family, and that journey eventually led me to raising my hand and joining the Army. One of the best decisions of my life. And then after that, I left the military and went back to school. And after that, I started my professional journey as my frontal lobe was still developing. And, eventually that led to me starting my entrepreneurial career. And the journey of growth and the theme of struggle has been a consistent part of my journey through it, every one of those chapters. And undoubtedly will continue. And I'll just keep doing my best.
What was it how did growing up in a small town, then joining the Army, which is the antithesis of small anything, and you're part of this great structure, culture, discipline, all these things that the military brings. What led you to that?
Well, I joined the Army for two reasons. One, I always had this overwhelming desire to serve. It was just in me. I was always one of those kids that for some reason, when chaos happened, I ran towards it instead of running away from it. And I think a lot of soldiers will tell you they're intuitively wired that way. However, I also raised my hand because, I'm one of 13 kids.
Wow.
I have 7 brothers, 5 sisters, and I was the first one born in the U.S.
Wow.
And at a very young age, my dad used to tell me stories about, his desire when he was a young man to join the military in Mexico. But family hardship struck. He wasn't able to do so. And that, catapulted him into more struggle. And he would tell me these stories as I was growing up. And every time that I heard that story, Lucas, I could feel this hole that he had in his heart. And the day that I turned 18, I had the recruiter pick me up outside of the gym door. I didn't tell anybody. I swore a few people to secrecy. And then I came back the next day, and my dad, they had no idea where I was. And I remember walking in the front door, and I laid the Army contract on the table, this folder that I had. And my dad, he was ready to let me have it. And he asked me, son, what is that? And I said, Dad, I joined the Army. And he immediately softened. He turned around, he walked towards the window, and I could see as he was looking out, I could see his shoulders shaking a little bit. It's the second time in my life that I'd seen my father cry. So that's the biggest driver for me raising my hand to go from that small town environment to join the Army was to feel the hole that my dad had in his heart.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Yes.
Let's talk about being one of 13 kids. I come from a family that is also has big family, that same number on my dad's side. What was that like for you growing up with that many siblings and not only feeling the attention from your parents, but what was that like where you felt a sense of belonging?
Growing up, I thought, I didn't think anything different, right? My wife will still tell you that, hey, I still eat with my elbows on the table because I've been protecting my food my whole life, right? So
Good, yeah.
anytime we have a meal together, watch out. I will steal your bacon. Uh, you know, I'm number 11.
Mm.
And so I grew up in an environment where I was always studying my siblings, and I had some great role models. I had some reverse role models. I mean, what's that? One of my favorite quotes is siblings, they're the enemy you can't live without. And
That's good.
I learned a lot from watching their choices growing up. But we grew up in a home that's actually smaller than the barn that I work out of here.
Wow.
And, had a very modest, humble upbringing, but we were doing the best we could. And, so many lessons that I learned from being in that environment of all of us having to contribute. Everyone knew their part, everyone knew their role. But at the same time, it also, what a course in negotiation, having to argue with your siblings every day and not knowing which one was going to come at you, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, so many more benefits now than, all the pressures that we felt from the struggle then. But when you're in it, you don't see those gifts, right?
Right. Do you how did you, being one of the youngest, obviously, and even my wife and I, we have 3 kids. I know, I see that you have 3 kids on your website. The firstborn gets the real trials and tribulations of the parents. By the 3rd kid, we're like, okay, figure it. They treat it, we love them equally, but we grow as parents, I think. And how did you see how your older siblings were treated as being children of 1 and 13 versus you coming at the end and maybe having a softer experience?
Yeah, siblings, they always give me a hard time. They're like, "Oh, you didn't have it as hard as I did," or, "You dad did." Well, of course, hey, we make all our big mistakes with our first kids, right?
Yeah.
And then by the time our 3rd or 4th or whatever, we realize, they're not going to break.
Yeah,
It's us, not them.
right.
And you learn to, guide them with more compassion and patience. But, by the time you got to me at number 11, an interesting dynamic had evolved because a lot of my older siblings were helping my parents raise me. And, very traditional, conventional Mexican family. And like one of our family lore stories, like our sisters would take us out on their dates, and because my dad didn't trust any boys with them, and they'd have to be back at a certain time. And it's an interesting dynamic going back, but the stories that came from it, I actually was a pretty mischievous kid. I thought that my role in the family was to figure out something that my mom and dad had yet to see, and surprise them with it. And you named the boundary, I pole vaulted right over it, which I think was good training for my future entrepreneurial career.
You certainly did it at 18 years old, coming home and surprising them with the enlistment. That's awesome.
And I was the first one that had joined the military. So, I found my way to surprise them several times. And
that's good.
The beauty of it now is, my 3 coconuts are paying it forward. And my dad had a saying when we were growing up. Anytime I got in trouble, he'd say, in Spanish, he'd say, "Mijo, hijo eres, papá serás," which means, a son you are, a dad you'll be. You'll get yours. He said that to me every time I got in trouble, Lucas.
Son you are, a dad you'll be. That's good. Well, tell me. Oh, sorry, brother. You have had I want to get into the struggle, the overcoming the sense of adversity, but let's talk more about from enlisting to where you are today and that journey.
Yeah, a while ago, I think you asked me a little bit about the transition from growing up as a small town kid to the rigor and structure of the Army. That was a hard, interesting transition on some facets. Like one, I started meeting kids who grew up on the streets of Philadelphia or New York and all walks of life. So I was immediately thrown into this melting pot where you had to work together, regardless of what you thought or what you felt. Like we were on one mission.
Yeah.
So, man, the wealth of education that gives young men and women that join the forces. But, And then on the other hand, I remember in basic training having to get up at the wee hours of the morning and, do your physical training, and, you get into these days that had no end in sight. Well, I had the different perspective than a lot of these other soldiers because I'd been working in the fields my whole life. So I'm thinking, okay, 4:30, that's, I've been getting up at 5 almost my whole life since I was going to be in fourth grade. So, there were other things that really set me up for it. And I think a lot of young men and women that join the military probably have a pretty good diverse mix of those historical experiences that, when you put them together, the whole mission of the military in the beginning is to build trust and teach you to build trust quickly, which is what belonging is all about, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that was an interesting dynamic packed with lessons that we could talk about for days.
Wow. Where did you go? So once you enlist, where was your basic training, and what did you end up doing while you served?
Well, I started the military journey in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And then from there, I went to beautiful Fort Polk, Louisiana, which anyone who's a soldier that's been there knows that I'm being incredibly sarcastic. They call it Fort Puke in the military. And it was my first introduction to humidity growing up in the desert of New Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
I did a short assignment in Fort Richardson, Anchorage, Alaska, which was an incredible experience. Most fun I never want to have again.
Yeah.
So that was the triangle that my military journey took me through. And, I was actually in during the time right before the Gulf War. As I was getting out, Panama happened, which, was a 2-day mission. And then while I was in the Guard during college, we had the Gulf War. So
how have you taken what you learned in the military and also being one of 13 kids of adapting and accommodating? And how have you taken that to your professional career and helping companies today?
Wow, countless ways. I think a couple of standout examples. When you grow up in a large family like that, specifically one that was we were growing up, we were like one of the only Mexican families, a few other ones. And then we were a migrant farm working family going to different states. And, although it wasn't uncommon, I call it the invisible workforce. Like there were thousands of families, thousands of people doing back-breaking work, working in the fields. It wasn't as commonly known back then when I was growing up as it is now, although it still happens very frequently. So all those lessons that I learned through that journey, and then that experience that I had in the military that I explained there subtly, like you take all those that really what they teach you. If I had to boil it down to like one simple palatable phrase, what it really taught me as to be a better human being, to be a better leader was, hey, these great people that I serve and that I'm surrounding myself with, they're the same kind of different as me. They all want their story to matter. They all want to be the best version of themselves. They're all climbing their own mountain. They all want for the people that they care for to love them, to be proud of them. And so, I reflect on some of those hardships and those lessons that I learned throughout those two journeys. And I'm so grateful for them now. But, when you're in the mix of it, you don't think about that stuff. And there's a lot of young men and women that are going through that same journey now that I want to help them see some of that struggle that they're going through and reframe it the way that I was able to, so that they can see the gift that it's delivering for them. Like, hey, maybe it's part of the plan.
That's good. That's right. That leads me to asking about the book. So The Gift of Struggle. It's a great title.
Thank you.
What was the point where you said, okay, I have something to say and I want to put it in book format?
Well, writing a book wasn't on my list, Lucas. I think we were talking before, we started the show, like I moved to Portland, bought a farm to lay low. And, I wanted my kids to grow up in the dirt, but I'm a pretty introverted guy. And, I hadn't really built, I'd built a pretty large organization, populist group. We've done a lot of good in the world and helped a lot of people, but I don't get out much. And where I did get out, though, very intentionally, is I did a lot of storytelling, and I do a lot of storytelling for kids who were born on the wrong side of the opportunity divide like me, and for veterans, specifically veteran entrepreneurs. And it was through that journey that some, people that I respected that either heard me speak or they learned about my story, that they just kept encouraging me. And finally, when it came to a point of doing it, I reached out to get some good advice from some of these people. And in the end, the book that I wrote, very simply put, I wrote it for two reasons. One, I wrote it to give. And two, I wrote the book that I wish someone would have written for me as I was starting my leadership journey. It gave me permission to lead with my heart, because I believe that the need for compassionate leadership has never been greater than it is today. That's just a very strong opinion I have based on how I see people feel in organizations. I think now more than ever, young men and women want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be a part of a purpose-driven organization. And the only way that we can give that to them is by leading with our heart. And really being an authentic leader who isn't afraid to be AKA that vulnerable hero that shows them their imperfections and says, hey, it's okay.
Yes.
Like it's okay to do that. Matter of fact, we should all be doing this.
Right. Yeah. In fact, let me take my mask off. Let's show you.
Exactly.
What's interesting? I love the word in Hebrew for love is ahava, and that means to give. So anytime the word love in the Old Testament is written in the Bible, it's ahava, which means to give. So heart bait, what you're saying, you gave a gift. You wanted to give it to others. You also wanted to give it to yourself, which is love. You love people. It's very clear by your message, very clear by your mission, very clear by even the populist group. If anyone's listening, go look at their website. It's amazing what they're able to do within companies. And yet here's a question I have.
Sure.
More philosophical question is, fear can also reside in the heart. So when people are heart-based leadership, but if they're fear-based, how do you take a leader who is operating by fear and take them through that process so that they can truly operate through love and in love, which is what they're seeking in the first place, but maybe going down the wrong path to find it?
Right. Yeah. Hey, great question. I'm going to tell you a real brief story that I think will resonate, because I know you're an all-pro dad.
Awesome.
So a while back, my daughter wakes me up in my deep slumber, and I remember she tapped me on the shoulder, and I woke up and I see her little silhouette, and she says to me, she said, "Daddy, I'm scared." And I remember my natural intuition was to say, "Hey, it's okay. Don't be scared." Right. But I didn't do that. I sat up and I looked at her and I said, "Hey, honey, it's okay to be scared. Thank you for telling me you're scared." And I held her hand and we went back to her room, and I laid next to her and she went back to sleep. But the signal and the part of that story, and the reason I tell you that story is, I think is, we can take that metaphor is, too often we look at fear as a bad thing. And you and I both know that it's hiding something else.
Yes.
We're all afraid of something.
Yes.
And I believe that we as leaders who have recognized that need to take a different role and encourage these other leaders who may feel that way and tell them, say, "Hey, it's okay to be scared. Thank you for telling me." Because that builds that bravery and that courage for them to tell you the next time that they're afraid.
That's beautiful. So first of all, that is such a beautiful model. Have you heard the term gaslighting?
I have.
Yeah. So I don't know how or when it first developed, but to tell someone don't be what they feel is it, even though it's not intentional, it's culturally. We have culturally become a society that will gaslight our own children, our peers, our friends, our coworkers. It's like, no, that what you're experiencing doesn't exist, or, you know, and that's a beautiful model. What you said is, hey, yes, I hear you. It's okay. And then, so is that the model you teach business leaders? I mean, how does that translate? Because I love this model. And maybe backing up, I believe how the business community treats their employees is how a society goes. And so in the Bible, when people, like churches quote this narrative all the time, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. But I say it's not where you give. That's certainly part of it, but it's where you get it from. And so our hearts are actually tied to our place of employment, and how the business community treats their employees. It determines how an employee goes home and treats their family, treats their child. The child kicks the neighbor dog bites the other kid. The kid goes home, the ripple effect is negative. So how do we get it? How does the narrative start within companies to shift the leadership into a place of acknowledgement and authenticity so that they can stop gaslighting and start healing their cultures?
Yeah. Hey, a lot of great stuff in that summary and that question, Lucas. Well, I think first and foremost, I think what I would initially share is, like, I believe, like you, that most of it is unintentional, and that these great business leaders, these great men and women that are doing their best, trying to provide for their families, I believe that most people, if they knew a better way, would do it. And however, people also do what people see, right? There's been a lot of people for a long time that have had that authoritative, that very directive, that, that modeling of these leaders that aren't being authentic, that, that believe the alpha myths, that the leadership chain is the IQ chain. And I have a term I call ROE, like, incredible return on ego. It's like nobody wins when you have that, right? So let's pretend for a moment that we can only do so much about that, right? You can't boil the ocean.
Right.
However, here's how I would my philosophical approach has been pretty simple. And my leadership philosophy is this, and that we all struggle, but every struggle teaches us something. That's the gift. And leadership is sharing those gifts with others. Now, translating that to the business world, here's what I would encourage leaders to self-assess. Is like, okay, let's take for a moment, whatever business you're in, you want to have a great brand, right? Regardless of what problem you solve for the world, right? I don't think there's a business leader out there that would disagree with that. Okay, well, what is the brand? The brand is a lagging indicator of the strength of your culture. Because the stronger the culture, the better the brand. Yeah. Okay, so then let's look at the culture, right? What is the culture and what is the essence of it? Well, let's break that down a little bit. Culture comes from the Latin word cultus, which means to care. And as a leader, how do you show your people you care? Well, fundamentally, every interaction that you have to do one thing. You, as a leader, the most valuable asset that you will ever own as a leader or as an entrepreneur, as a human, as a father, is trust. Every interaction that you have with your people should somehow, some way build that trust. And that's all culture is. It's your cumulative interactions and the trust that it builds, which shows your people how much you care for them. In other words, I'll often ask leaders, what are you doing to intentionally show your people that you want more for them than from them? Isn't that the essence of caring for somebody?
Yeah, that's good.
Right? So, I'm systematically breaking it down. And I know you asked about the model, but that's how my brain works, based around my philosophical approach. And that's what I've done my best effort to do in building my organization, Populous Group. I've been imperfect. I've made more mistakes than we could possibly cover on this podcast.
Yeah.
I put a lot of those in a very unvarnished, transparent manner in my book with all the lessons. But it's like all it takes is that desire to make the choice that, hey, look, I want to lead with my heart and my mind. And I think that's the impact. The people you lead will go home and be a better father or a better mother.
Yes.
Or a better sister or a better friend at the end of the day. It's not that complicated.
That's right. And that's the ripple effect.
That's the ripple effect.
I really, the whole title of this podcast being the Golden Rule Revolution, I consider myself a revolutionary in that I do want to see society change. However, I reject the notion that the only or most effective revolution is through the means of violence. And so I say, look, you want to be a revolutionary, that's great. Treat people like people, be kind to people, because the ripple effect is unchanging. And I use the example that a slave trader, he was a second generation slave trader and a captain of 2 slave ships. He bought and sold countless number of slaves. And one day his ship goes down outside of West Africa, and another slave owner rescues him, and he, the rescued slave owner, thinking that he is going to be free because he's a white man, is sold as a slave to the Africans. And he's a slave there to this tribe for close to a year. He then has a radical transformation, realizing, this is a grave evil. What have I done? Goes back to London, becomes a preacher, one of the leading abolitionist voices in all of Great Britain, this little stone church. William Wilberforce, who eventually becomes the leading voice in Parliament, as a little boy sits in this church and hears this man named John Newton preach against the evils of slavery. And John Newton happened to write the most famous, or arguably the most famous melody ever written, which is Amazing Grace. And had that ripple effect, how he changed, led to William Wilberforce being the sole voice for many years in Parliament. And that is a positive ripple effect. And I think most people, we think just because we don't see the results doesn't mean we're not making the impact. We always make an impact, whether it's positive or negative. We're always either uplifting or tearing down.
Undoubtedly. I couldn't agree with you more. Like that's a goosebump story there that all happened with the modeling that we should show a kid, a young man or young woman that is watching.
Yes. They're
watching.
That's right. That's right. It's so beautiful. What
kind of changed my life. And I agree with you, right? It's, that's the violence. That's the easy choice.
Yes.
Like when you're driving on the freeway and someone cuts you off, like flipping them the bird, that's the easy choice.
Right.
assuming that, hey, maybe they just got a call and one of their children got hurt. Or, wow, maybe, we're all one phone call away from being on our knees. Maybe they just got that call. So, like that right there, that takes real courage and that's real leadership there versus, taking the easy route. That's what violence is. So I couldn't agree with you more.
That's beautiful. It's also, what you just said is it's compassion. I talk to so many different types of people, and I lead these men's retreats, and I just finished weekend 2 of this program that I lead with the men. And I talk about politics being it's a fool's game. It's the only thing that you have control of in politics is whether you vote and whether you share your voice. The rest, the results, let it go, because there's no control over it. But it's like a drug that constantly is feeding society and creating this voracious need to indict another person. And what I say specifically, and it's really easy to talk about how much people hate Donald Trump, but my question to them, to anyone, and I ain't vote for him, I'm not pro him, it doesn't matter. What I am saying is, if I grew up in his house, how can I say I'd be any different than he is? I cannot. I can't say if I grew up with that name and that pressure, and who knows his story, I can't say I'd be any different. And it's the same. What you're saying is, we're driving on the road. If I got that call, I would cut people off. How would I be any different? And so it is having that true sense of compassion for humanity. And that's why I'm so honored to have you on the show, because this is the message that I believe we're coming to a tipping point where this narrative, as the pendulum swings and society wants to pull us into this craze, the narrative that you're sharing, the narrative of this podcast and others, there's countless others, when the crazy happens where everyone's like, what's going on? I think these messages of like, hold the course, treat people well, love people, those are the messages that will be seen and then I think gravitated towards.
Undoubtedly. And that we need to be the stream. The stream always wins. We may not see the immediate effects of that, but hey, let's keep eroding. Let's keep chipping away at it. And we're on a similar journey to where we know it's going to be hard, but hey, isn't anything worthwhile uphill? So let's just keep at it, right? That's Stream always wins. Stream always wins. I think anyone that would look back, the river that goes through the Grand Canyon is the Colorado River, I believe, right?
Yes.
I would say the Colorado River is winning. So, yeah. So, like at some point in time, that canyon wasn't that canyon. So
I see T-shirts with that somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, well, if it helps someone, that's great. Just do something good with it.
Be like the Colorado River.
That's it. Be like the Colorado River.
That's good.
Yeah, Lucas, I had an experience when I was 17, and I think brings to life the essence of your message. Would you mind if I told that story?
Please.
When I was 17, my brother and I, we were on a return trip home from a basketball game. And along the way, the team stopped for dinner. And everybody unloaded off the bus. My kids are knocking on the window.
All good.
We're all pro dads, right?
In my office, and the kids are
exactly.
Yeah, no
and when we stopped for dinner, everybody unloaded off the bus, except for me and my brother. Being one of 13 kids, we didn't have the means to play sports and afford dinner. And we were very accustomed to being on that bus. We were well beyond the embarrassment. Our parents were doing the best they could. Well, a few moments after the team unloaded, one of the dads to the other player steps on board the bus. And he walked towards the back of the bus and he razzed me a little bit because Ed had outscored me that night. And then he said something to me, Lucas, that I will always remember. He said, Bobby, it would make me very happy if you would allow me to buy you boys dinner so that you can join the rest of the team. Nobody else has to know. All you have to do to thank me is do the same thing for another great kid just like you in the future. And I will never forget how I felt in that moment. And I remember stepping off that bus, and I had no idea what I was going to do with my life outside of having the desire to raise my hand a year from there. But I knew, regardless of what I chose to do, I knew why. I would somehow, some way, figure out a way to create something that would allow me to pay forward that kind act to other kids like me who were born on the wrong side of the opportunity divide. And the interesting part of that story that I think fits right into this exchange that we just had is, when people ask me how come it had such a big and profound impact on me, of course, there was the narrative of what was going on with my family and the intergenerational poverty and so forth. But there was something different about this man that stepped on board the bus. You see, he was a real successful businessman in the community. And the narrative that I told myself was that, hey, men like him, they don't see kids like me. But with one act of kindness, not only did he show me that I was wrong, he taught me that the single most important part of leadership is seeing and encouraging potential. And even more than that, like at that point in time, the biggest struggle that I had was I wanted my story to matter, and I didn't know if it ever would. Well, you fast forward many years from that moment, And after I started my company, and that moment became the invisible force that drove me. And it's why I started my company.
So cool.
Yet I had never told this man. I call him, this was many years later, and I tell him, and it was a special phone call, and I could tell he was deeply touched. We both shed some awesomeness.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a real special moment for me. And a few days later, after that call, Lucas, I get a letter from him. And in that letter, he says to me, he says, "Hey, Bobby, thank you for calling me and telling me, the bus story. I'm not afraid to admit to you how many tears I shed before and after that call. You made me feel like my life had mattered."
Wow.
And think about that. His kind act changed the course for me. Me telling him what his kind act for me made him feel like his life has mattered. So we all play our part in this game of compassion. If our narrative is,
so good.
If our narrative is, hey, they don't care, well, do you really know? Like Mr. Teague didn't tell anyone he came on board the bus and bought me dinner, right? A lot of people didn't know about that.
Right.
Because for many years, I didn't have the courage. I started my company. It wasn't until 10 years in that I actually told my company that story. It was raging like an inferno in me, but I didn't have the courage as a leader to share that story. And once I did, though, it transformed my company into a community. And it just erupted this kindness from one another because we started openly talking about these kind of things. And like, it matters. We have to do these things.
Yes.
And kindness and compassion, it changes lives.
Yes.
And sometimes we don't know the lives that other people are changing, regardless of what our beliefs are.
That's right.
So, I mean, thank you for letting me share that. But it's so important that these great listeners that you have, we all do our part to pay forward the gifts from our struggles and those kind acts. And we tell these people because you never know. He had no idea that it would someday ignite me to create this large company that's sending kids to school and helping veterans and stuff. And, he would have never known. And he didn't know until I called him.
So cool.
Like, that's what life's all about. Wouldn't you agree?
Right.
Like, at the end of the day, we all want our story to matter.
That's right. And had he taken the credit when you got off the bus, had he said, "I'm going to buy you," that would have been the end of it. You would have gotten a meal, but that true sense of giving you guys and not shaming and loving, and that is such a.
Yeah. He wanted more for us.
Yes.
Than he wanted from us.
Yes.
All he said was, "Hey, do it someday for another great kid just like you on this bus." Like, I can't tell the story without awesomeness boiling up in my eyes and hair on my arm standing up. Like, I'm so incredibly grateful for that kind act. It changed my life. And so, kindness will change lives more impactfully than violence will.
Yes. Brother, how can people connect with you? Because I'm going to ask everyone listening, the probability that you have experienced something very similar, or that you are either on the receiving end or on the giving end, is very high. And so I'm going to ask you to follow up with this and share your stories. But Bobby, how can people connect with you if they want to get to know you more, hear your book, read your book, connect with you?
Yeah, man, nothing would please me more. The book's The Gift of Struggle, and it launched in June. It's getting some exciting momentum. I'm excited for the feedback I'm getting. My website's bobby-herrera.com, and they can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, and that's at Bobby Herrera PG. So,
awesome. I'll put all that in the show notes so people can
that's great.
Click on it. And
I great for me is that, I want to start a student of struggle revolution like yourself, and
love it.
Have our struggles connect us and reframe how we view it. And let's view it as a source of empowerment so we can help that person that needs the help that we want to give them.
That's right. You're creating heroes, because the hero's journey is they were at a place, they knew they were meant to be somewhere else. They experienced hardship and overcame that hardship to finally be where they always felt they were supposed to be. And no one cares about a hero that didn't overcome anything.
Right.
No one listens to a leader that doesn't share the struggle.
Yeah, that's a boring movie to watch. We'll walk out of that theater, right? It's like,
Totally.
hey, it's like, is there anything else on? Like, I want to see something get blown up, or like I want to see someone lose all their money like unexpectedly.
That's
like
right. That's right.
That's the stuff we want to see anyway. So let's share it. Let's talk about it.
That's right.
Everybody struggles.
It's the one unifying factor is everyone struggles. No one escapes this earth without some sort of pain, trauma, failure, disappointment, rejection, loss.
Yeah. And sequentially, it always comes before transformation. Like when you think about it, you must go through struggle, pain, and suffering to get to wisdom, right? So I'll often say, the long way is a shortcut.
That's good. This is good, man. I'm going to listen. I always listen back to the episode when it goes live. But I'm going to listen back to this, I know, a few times. This is a lot. You've given some really good nuggets. A company into a community. That's such a beautiful concept. The long way is the shortcut. It's a son you are, a father you shall be. It's just beautiful. And I'm honored to have you on, brother. Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful you reached out to me, and I love the good you're doing, and I'm here to help you any way that I can too. So thank you.
Thanks, brother. Well, what an amazing man, Bobby Herrera. If you in any way relate to this, share your story. Reach out to me, lucasmack.com. You can email me at lucas@lucasmack.com. Message me, share your story with Bobby. I'm going to put his contact information in the show notes. What a beautiful concept. What did he say? A company into a community. That is such a beautiful, you have the power, whether you're a business leader or simply an employee at any level in a company, you have the authority, you have the power, and you actually have the influence to make that difference. So I am standing with you and encourage you to not only make that impact, but to share your stories of impact with us so that we can encourage other people. I'm so honored to have Bobby on. Thank you, Bobby. And I'm honored that you have joined me in this journey of treating people like people and nothing less. My name is Lucas Mack. I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.